Make sure you check this out on YouTube, guys. It's Sight Fishing 101. You're going to learn a lot in this video.
If you only had one rod with one bait to bedfish sight fishing, what would be that one bait and what color?
I mean, if I only had one for bed fishing or sight fishing?
Bed fishing.
It'd probably have to be, it would be a white pit boss, you know, like a 3-inch Berkeley pit boss, casting rod, 14-pound test. I mean, that's probably what, if I was just bed fishing, you know, if we start talking about sight fishing, and which would encompass bed fishing, then I'd probably say wacky worm. I mean, because you can catch bed fish on a wacky worm really good, and obviously you can catch cruising fish and all different kinds of fish like that as well. But if he's locked on the bed, I'm gonna go with pit boss.
That's really simple. It's the Crawl Fatty Junior. It's Berkeley power bait. It's a little crawl in green pumpkin. I'll put it on a 3/0 fusion hook with a flat out tungsten weight. That little crawl just imitates what every bass cannot stand on the bed, and its thinner profile allows for the ultimate hookup.
For sight fishing?
Yep.
Oh, that's an easy one for me. It's I use spinning rod. I use 15-pound braid with 8-pound floor leader, and I use an 1/8 ounce geeky head with the green pumpkin zoom trick on.
It's got to be a bubble butt by 13 Fishing. It's a Senko style bait, but it has a little air pocket in the tail of that worm. And what it will do is, I like to put a tiny little nail weight, and it'll get that bait down there on the bottom, and that tail of the bubble butt will actually stand up, and it drives them nuts. But just a green pumpkin, you can throw that color all around the country. It seems to get them to bite pretty well.
Good.
You know, so it's kind of a sleeper little deal. Exposed actually in the last tournament, but it's a 4-inch general with a tail spinner on the back of it. Something about that flash really agitates them spawning bass.
I'm gonna say, just because I'm kind of old school, still a tube is probably one of the best bed fishing baits that I've ever been.
Well, you got any tricks for rigging that tube for better hookup and landing percentages or things of that nature?
Well, you know, nowadays we've got so many hook options, you know, an EWG, an extra wide gap hook, or even tube style hooks. You know, back when we first was fishing with those, we were still using like wide gap straight shanks, and those were a no-no, man. You lost so many fish, you missed fish, but I'd rig it with as big a hook as you can get into it and make sure it's got an extra wide gap.
Drop shot.
With what bait?
Probably just like if I can only have one, probably a 5-inch straight money from Berkeley.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple little flat tail worm.
Oh, it's gonna be it's a white slop craw. It's a bait I designed for Havoc. It's no longer available, but it's like, yeah, they bite it, they can't not get the hook, so it's pretty legit.
It would be a V&M J-Bug in white, 1/2 ounce, elite tungsten weight, rigged with a Hayabusa FPP straight 5/0 hook, 20-pound Sunline flipping fluorocarbon.
I would probably have to say it would be like a Texas rig for sight fishing. It would be a Texas rig with like 20-pound line, probably either monofilament or a fluorocarbon. I like monofilament because of the stretch, but with like a 1/4 or 3/16 with like a 4/0 owner hook, and probably would have to be, man, there's 3 different things that I really rely on, but probably number 1 would probably be a tube, and probably a green pumpkin or watermelon, just one of those natural colors in a tube. 3.5-inch tube.
All right, well, you know, historically a tube kind of has a reputation of low hookup percentages. Is there a trick that you do with that tube to make the hookup better?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do a couple things. You can cut it with a pair of scissors, just slit it, and so it only has to go through one membrane. But generally what I like to do is just, like if this is your tube, instead of coming straight through it, I just basically just tag it right on the corner. So If it's round, okay, so basically the hook kind of comes from this angle. Instead of coming straight through like this, it's just resting on the side, and I'm just barely skin hooking it. So when the fish bites it, I mean, the hook's it's already exposed. The only thing I'm barely doing is skin hooking it on the side, and it works really well.
Okay, we've done the one bait deal. Typically, you've got a whole deck full of baits. Name, if you had 3 rods on the deck, your must-haves that you would have on the deck of your boat for sight fishing, and explain why those 3 as opposed to just having 1.
Yeah, so definitely have a wacky general on, power bait, green pumpkin. I'd keep that always on no matter what. Have it on a little size 1, fusion hook, wacky style. That's a must. I'm always going to have a flipping stick on, because if I find a good fish and she's in some bushes or in a dock or a tree or whatnot, I'm going to have 65-pound spider wire ultra cast on a flipping stick with a 4/0 fusion hook, or 3/0 fusion with that crawl fatty with like a 5/16, 3/8 flat out tungsten. So when I find a big one, I know I can power her out of there. I caught a 5-pounder at Smith Lake up in the bushes, and it was on that same deal. And then what's weird is I'll always have a drop shot on for those finicky fish. So more than likely 2 spinning rods, 1 flipping stick. If I can find the fish, normally I can get them to bite.
I'm gonna do like a 7-inch osprey or bass tricks, slop craw, and then a general, 5-inch general, Berkeley general, just a weightless worm.
Probably a 3/8 ounce drop shot, some kind of little finesse worm, like a straight shooter worm on there. Green pumpkin, usually on that kind of stuff. And probably my 3rd choice would probably be some kind of top water to get way back off and blind cast up there, like a frog or a pawpaw or something like that. Bill Lewis stutter step, but that's really not like sight fishing, but sometimes blind casting from a long ways will get it done.
The second one would be a Berkeley Power Hog 4-inch. And I would have it on a 3/8 or 1/2 ounce weight Texas rigged, and then probably just a wacky rig, like a general on another spinning rod. But I love spinning rods, so yeah, wacky general, 4-inch power hog, and a drop shot. If I can't catch them on one of those on a bed, I'm probably moving on.
Yeah. So even for a giant fish, you've got found same setups.
That's when because I throw this on 50-pound braid to a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, so it's big setup.
That's the eye crosser, right?
Yeah, no doubt. No, straight through the dome.
You're gonna need I'm gonna use like a zinker, like the Z-Man, or just a straight tail worm, like a worm with no action to it. That's just probably the next best thing. Or I'm gonna say most of the younger guys are gonna tell you that is the best thing when it comes to bed fishing. And then probably after that would be a drop shot. Fish on beds, there's something about being able to keep that bait moving, but not actually moving it away from where you want to keep it. That drop shot really gets them aggravated.
All right, you got a giant found on a bed.
Yep.
What are you reaching for?
I got a flipping stick and I got a tube on there, and I'm pitching to him. And because if it's a really big fish like that, I just don't want it even. I don't want to spend the effort and just kind of set myself up for failure. So I'm going to pitch in there with some heavy. I'm going to start off with the heaviest rod I got and flipping it in there, and then maybe work my way down. I'm not going to start with something small.
You know, if I had 3 rods and 3 rods only, I'd have, of course, one that I just said. I like throwing that on a spinning rod. Another one is just going to be your standard Texas rig. Me personally, I like to throw a 4-inch Berkeley pit boss, and then my 3rd rod is just going to be one that's just going to really aggravate them bass, and I like throwing a swim bait on them. Not necessarily am I going to catch them on that, but it just really aggravates that bass for me to be able to catch them on that Texas rig or catch them on that general.
What's your go-to swim bait for that scenario?
So it's actually a Jackal air gun. It's a little bluegill hard bait. It sinks really slow, and it's just phenomenal, just twitching it real slow over them bed fish.
All right, so if you give me 3, I'm gonna have one, just a Texas rig with just a white crawl, like the pit boss or something similar. Then I'm gonna have a wacky worm, and I like a small. I usually use a 4-inch, like a finesse worm. That's what I like to use. Sometimes I'll use nail and the nail weight in the head. Sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on, if I'm fishing for a bedded fish, I'll probably put a nail weight in it. Fishing for like fry garters or cruisers, I don't put a nail. And then my third one, maybe, man, those two are predominantly what I'm going to catch them on. I would choose a swim bait, like, and not necessarily, that's not necessarily a good answer, but I would use that. I use the swim bait to find them, and sometimes you catch them, but I'm always going to have a swim bait tied on, and it's important for me to throw that swim bait and find fish. So if you're only going to give me 3, I would just take that one and like, I know I'm not going to use it to catch any fish, but I'd still have to have it. It'd have to be one of my 3, and then I'd use my wacky worm and Texas rig for the other 2.
Well, swim bait's kind of a vague term now. What specific swim bait would Anthony Gagliardi have tied on?
Any line through. It doesn't have to be a line through. A lot of times I like one that I can, that I can bury a hook in, or this just weedless, not necessarily bury the hook, but something that I can skip under docks, skip under overhangs and things like that, and it's not going to get hung up. And I did a video here. We did a show with Scott Martin, and I was catching them actually I was throwing 6-inch swim bait, and that's what I was throwing to them on the bed. That's what they wanted, and they bit that better than anything else. So, the swim bait's kind of underrated, I think, when it comes to bed fishing and sight fishing. So, it's a player for me.
Probably the first one that I would have is, again, that tube, and then I would probably have a Senko type bait like a striking shimmy stick or an Ocho, and I'd have that weightless. I just love to pitch that around while I'm looking, but then there's times when I find a fish that's on a bed and he doesn't want something that's falling really fast. He doesn't want something that's in a nose down position. He wants something that just kind of generally floats down, and that could be Texas rig or it could be on a wacky hook. But a shimmy stick, a soft stick bait like that. And then the third thing that I would probably have to have is probably a lizard or a topwater. A lot of times you can actually look at areas where where a fish could be set up to spawn, and you can throw a topwater over there, typically a frog or some sort of prop bait or even a popper, and just kind of sit it there motionless. You got to fish it pretty slow, because obviously you pull it too far too fast and he's going to get away from his bed. He's not going to eat it. But those are probably the 3 things that I'd probably have to have.
So the first rod's obviously going to be that Senko, that bubble butt by 13 fishing. I'm going to have a cross style bait, any kind of color, like a green pumpkin. And then I'm also going to have, let's see, what else do I got rigged up? I like to throw like a fluke style bait. A fluke style bait sometimes gets them, because that thing you can kind of jump it towards their bed. And a lot of times I'll jump it right at their face and kill it. And if those fish are just a little bit stubborn, that bait fish style bait tends to, if that thing just falling right down in front of their face, it'll drive them crazy. So there's my 3.
Can I take a picture of your sight fishing box?
I don't have a sight fishing box.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of do, I have, literally a designated bed fishing box of all kinds of things. I'll go as small as a crappie tube, all the way as big as something about the size of my foot, so I really feel like you just need to have that spectrum. No real, tricks, I guess, just a big arsenal to really try to catch them bass.
Hey, can I take a picture of your bed fishing box?
No. That's a hell no.
Would you mind if we saw that box?
Yeah, I can show you the box.
Wow, the first pro that is going to let me see inside the box.